Welcome to the Podgress Report. I wanted to take a minute before this episode to simply thank you for listening to the Podgress Report, for subscribing, for sharing it with other people who might benefit from the research and the journalists and the authors and the success stories that we bring weekly to this podcast, all on the topic of workplace wellness, how to lead, how to be the CEO of you.com. We're building a strong community of people dedicated to a healthier what's next and a healthier workplace. Thanks for being a part of it. And now, today's episode.
I could not be more excited about what is about to happen today with our guest. She is someone who I know is a brave and effective connector. But what makes her really, really exciting for me, for you, dear listener, is that this is a person who has had a, let's say, unconventional career path and followed her curiosity to live a life led by talent, curiosity, and a distinct desire to understand more fully, who am I really? Ladies and gentlemen, the inimitable Lizzie Azzolino, the founder of Work with Lizzie. Hi, Lizzie. Thank you so much for being here today on the Podgress Report.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, Jen.
So we have a lot to talk about. We need to probably back up a fair bit right now to understand how it is you got to this moment and the current vision that you're carrying forward with Work with Lizzie. You started in fact, why don't I let you tell a little bit about where you started, how you had your awakening, and where you're headed.
Oh gosh, that's a big story. I went to school for journalism. Story and its power to create meaning for us and to bring us together collectively has always been the through thread of my career. I initially took my career into advertising. I was one of the earliest employees at Spanx, Sarah Blakely's hosiery company. I was the young millennial who knew about this thing called social media, how to use it to have authentic, that was the buzzword at the time, conversations between brands and customers. I loved it so much because it was a mix of story, authenticity, and innovation. I continued this thread in my career as I moved into advertising agencies and sort of moved further upstream into brand strategy and brand planning. I worked in a digital advertising agency where we did not have anything called brand strategy or brand planning. I still remember to this day, SlideShare was like the place that people learned everything back in the day. I remember coming across a presentation on this thing called brand planning. I had no idea what this meant. And it was like I was sucked into this world. And I knew this is what I was supposed to do. So I know you mentioned the importance of connecting and being brave. I started reaching out to people who called themselves brand planners on LinkedIn. I probably had 20 conversations with people to learn as much as possible. I ended up finding out about different conferences that were lower budget because this was all self-funded. Taught myself how to be my own version of a brand strategist. Then I went and created a brand strategy position for myself at another agency in Atlanta and did that for a number of years. Admittedly, that was the phase that I call my ice queen phase. So, yeah.
Why ice queen phase?
I was so linearly focused on the work and being the best at the work and driving the best work from my team that I was excellent at what I did. All of my performance reviews said that. However, people didn't like working with me. I had so been ignoring the human side of who I was and how we worked together on this strive for excellence. It just so happened that our agency was going through a really transitional moment and they decided to do a number of layoffs. And I was one of them. It was the hardest thing and the best thing because I knew I wasn't happy. It just felt like this is amazing work, but something is missing. Luckily, I had a good period of severance, and I started feeling into what is it that I want to do next, really. I decided to move from Atlanta, which is largely where I grew up, to San Francisco. Girl from the South, never visited San Francisco. I think it was one of the first times that I really trusted my intuition beyond logic. I knew nothing about the agency landscape there, and I did my thing again. I knew I wanted to continue to move into the most innovative space and do brand strategy. So I started researching agencies, having informational interviews. I did not apply to a single job. I don't believe I ever will. And I actually recommend that a lot of people don't. I really wanted to get to know people and understand the landscape. I spoke to recruiters, to agency leaders, to strategists. I remember reading in the New York Times one day about this brand new agency called Argonaut was just launching. Their photo on their website, they looked like pirates, and they were going to create a different type of agency. I thought, this feels really interesting to me. So I reached out to their head of strategy, one of the founders, and was like, you don't know me. This is a little bit about me. Would love to connect and see if there are opportunities. And there weren't at the time, but we connected. And 2 weeks later, he sent me an email saying, you have a lot of wireless category experience. We are just closing a really big wireless carrier and would love to see about hiring you as our first strategy director.
I see one of your true steel threads as your ability to make and forge brave connections. I see that as somebody creating, again, their own reality.
Yes, I view it as everything that I do is about creating uncommon connections. I view myself very much as like that type of bridge builder. So in my career, in my life, it's always about how can I bring the wholeness of my work and life experience into what it is I want to do next to bring a really diverse point of view. What I have learned about connecting with people is I never approach people with a narrow outcome in mind that is about getting something from them. That never feels good to me. It always comes from a genuine curiosity about them and also something that I want to give. Sometimes those connections turn into jobs or clients or whatever it is. Many times they don't, but they are always so valuable to just have that real human connection that is generous on both parts.
That I have seen you do firsthand. I find it incredibly inspiring, almost shockingly simple. Like, we should all do that, right? It should be less transactional. But here I sit, an incredibly socially awkward person, right? Who just sees how simple it is to say, hi, interested in you, want to know more about your story. If you ever want to connect, let me know. There's a million ways to get into that discussion, but just starting it, just starting the discussion feels very brave, almost novel, because so many of those discussions do feel transactional and frankly are transactional. So I've seen you do that firsthand, and it is refreshing. It is brave. And your story is proof positive that when you lean in with a lens of curiosity, great things happen, but they probably are slightly different than you would have expected if you tried to define it at the onset.
That's exactly right. I really did have a chapter of life where I called myself, now looking back, not at the time, but called myself this like ice queen. And admittedly, people, and I can say this now because it is so far in my past, but people were like objects that were in my way to what it is I wanted, or that I needed something from to get what it was I thought I wanted. And that was a miserable way way to live and to work.
If you can start to recognize in yourself, I see my motives here are transactional. I see myself as defining the outcome instead of allowing for life to unfold, instead of seeing this person as part of my community, part of my circle, and instead as a piece I need to move on a chessboard, I think you're golden. It is super refreshing and gives me food for thought on how can I be better at just, if I have an interest. The thing that stops me isn't I don't have a transaction to do with this person. The thing that stops me, personally me, is that social awkwardness. And that's just muscle memory that I'll have to work through by putting in the reps, I think. But you inspire me to put in the reps, and I appreciate you for that.
How beautiful. Jen, I'd love to layer in one additional thought. And this is actually a framework that through some of the training that I've done, I have learned, which is oftentimes, especially in the context of work, we jump to action. So what is it that I need? What is it that we're going to do? Right? Mm-hmm. However, there are 3 things that need to happen in sequence in order to get to action. So the first is relationship. Everything meaningful is built on a foundation of relationship. Personally, professionally, getting to know each other, getting to know each of our interests, where we're coming from, whatever it is that's relevant to the context of what we're talking about. So from relationship, we can then begin to explore possibilities. Okay, now that we know each other, like what are some things that are possible? Let's brainstorm, let's throw out ideas. Here's an idea I have, what do you have? And then after we explore possibilities, we move to action. So we can't jump from relationship to action. we have to move through possibilities and then towards action. So if you already have an established relationship with someone, you can sort of move past some of these steps. But so often we just get into this transactional space, and maybe sometimes it works, but it never lasts for the long term.
Mm-hmm. Agree. Sitting here, coming pretty fresh out of my traditional full-time corporate gig, it's a circuit. And if you are up against folks that don't think that way, that are thinking transactionally and maybe cannot get past that, and that can be hard then to build that more rich, there has to be something before the outcome approach if you don't have somebody willing to build a more robust circuit. I ascribe completely to the direction that you're guiding here toward. I think that more of us need to take up that mantle for it to work really effectively.
That's exactly right. And what I would suggest for leaders, for people who are in a moment where they are considering what's next in their career and beginning to have conversations along those lines with companies, with different people, if relationship is something that you want to prioritize in the future path that you're heading down, whatever it is, it's very likely you are not going to be a fit for or want to work with the company or client that isn't also prioritizing that.
This is where you get into those values alignment questions that become either an accelerator for a rich life or an erosion of your soul that could lead to burnout or to workplace stress. Because if you hold that deeper connection as a value or something that is non-negotiable for you, a way that makes you feel good, 1000% agree that yes, you absolutely must explore it from the onset. Or if you're in it right now, be honest with yourself to say, this is something that I hold as a value that the organization or the team or the leader does not hold. And as such, we will never connect in this place. Now, we left you on the move to San Francisco. We took a little bit of a diversion, which I think was fantastic. And you get to San Francisco for, again, a new skill set, a new interest that you're now making part of your career arc. And then what happened?
Yes. Number one, I got to San Francisco and I probably cried for one of the first times in my life when I saw the Golden Gate Bridge. It just was like, this is home for me. I felt very at home in myself. I began working and very quickly realized that this was no longer me, advertising and brand strategy, but it is what got me to San Francisco, right? So it's like not too much change at once, not too much unknown at once. I began casually exploring what was next. The way that I found what was next was I was in an Uber pool. I remember overhearing a conversation with two people talking about design. I thought design was like beautiful things, right? Which obviously it is, but design is so much more. And then they started talking about design thinking. My ears perked up, got really curious about it. I go home and I start Googling everything I could about design thinking. And I thought, oh, this is how I can take my toolbox that I've been building and move it into San Francisco, where it's like innovation, design. They were in the water. I was ready to drink it. So I started exploring different design and innovation opportunities. I found a studio I really wanted to work with, started building relationships with them. It took many months for a role to form. But it just so happened that one of their leaders who knew a lot about brand was leaving to move to New York, and I was hired to be a strategist at a studio called fuseproject, which is owned by Eve Bahar, who's a very well-regarded industrial designer. And we did two things. We launched startups from the ground up, and we helped large corporations really think about their innovation roadmap. Ultimately, I learned how to do business modeling, product strategy, and I learned what design strategy meant, but it was all rooted in story for me. And so I brought my own flavor to it. It was an incredibly rewarding time working with such a interdisciplinary team to continue to expand my skill set. And then maybe the biggest pivot in my career, which was, I still remember to this day, I was giving a presentation to the global chairman of a very large beauty company about the future of sunscreen. This is what we were talking about. I had my phone in my back pocket and it just kept buzzing. So finally I excused myself, and it was a doctor in a hospital in Atlanta, which is where my mom was living at the time. He said, "Lizzie, we have your mom, Kathy, here in the hospital. She is likely not going to make it through the night. You should get on a plane." And my world stopped. I feel like from that moment to the getting on the plane, to the getting to the hospital room, I was so present because I didn't want to think about the future, because I was scared to think about the future. I even remember on that plane ride asking myself, like, what am I doing with my life? What is this all about? Life just seemed so precious in that moment. Some important context is my mom is an alcoholic, and I was in an extremely codependent relationship with her for most of my life. My move to San Francisco was one of the hardest but most important things that I did to detach myself with love. It was something that at the time I felt guilty about every single day. My mom was, I felt at the time, in the hospital because I moved. I arrived in the hospital room. I opened the door, and my mom was highly medicated. She looked at me and she said, "Who are you?" She didn't know who I was. She didn't recognize me. There was something about her pain was my pain. Her beliefs were my beliefs. We were so interconnected that having my mom ask me that question, it had me realize that I did not know the answer, really, beyond the person I thought I was supposed to be, what I thought I needed to do to be happy and successful. I didn't really know who I was deep down. I will share that my mom is still alive today. I remember the next morning, the doctor, he said, Lizzie, the only reason your mom is alive is because you came, which was hard for me to hear. It also interestingly reinforced that I really needed to live my own life.
Right. Even in the flight over, Lizzie, we've talked about this moment, and it seems it's more extended even than just when your mom asked you the question. You started having that real deep moment of presence and awareness that, am I doing this right on the flight over? And then it was underscored almost as I don't want to call it a gift because it certainly isn't a gift moment, but almost as an exclamation point when you were asked by your mom, who are you? So here now you have, it seems like a switch that's flipped because you really found something. And you were at Fuse for some time. This isn't 2 weeks in or 3 weeks in. This is years in where you're having this awakening that, oh, even though I was actually enjoying this, I don't know if this is me.
That's right. I view getting laid off in Atlanta as the real beginning of the unraveling of all of these stories of what I wasn't to start to reveal who I really was. It was almost like the moving to San Francisco was a part of my thawing in so many ways. The experience with my mom was more of a catalyst, and it was a gift. The hardest moments in my life have been the greatest gift, and there have been many more since then. However, I know that my relationship to the hardest moments, seeing them as a gift, seeing them as there is something here for me to learn about myself. There is a way that life is inviting me to show up differently. That is a gift I have. There is this Kabbalistic belief in this idea of certainty. Certainty, as they say it, is different than we may traditionally think of this, but certainty is everything, everyone, every experience that meets us on our path is here to help us grow and transform. And that truly is how I have viewed my life.
It's in the mindset. It's in the mindset, which is why health and a healthy mindset and bringing yourself back to a healthy arc when you're depleted is so important, because when your mindset is not okay, you cannot accept those gifts appropriately or learn from them. So yes, being able to accept those moments, those teachable moments, and have the self-awareness to say, what am I to learn from this to continue to evolve and enrich my life? That is one of the keys. If you break down what a successful person looks like, they will have that within them.
Absolutely. And an important thing to note is the truth is some things are just hard.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And sometimes the thing to learn is I'm right now here to really feel all the feelings that are coming up for me and to accept reality as it is, to accept the circumstances as they are, but not be a victim to them. However, things can be hard. Everything's not supposed to be like light and roses all the time.
That's right.
I often think about this. I don't know what life would be like if it was just like monotone, easy breezy all the time. We're here to grow and to evolve and to really display our resilience.
You're having this moment where you realize, yeah, exactly. Who am I? What happened next is where we've just talked about. You did have a very curiosity-driven, interest-driven career arc even to that point. But I believe this was something that accelerated that and changed it vitally. Right? This podcast is built for people who are in that moment of something's not right here. I might not even be sure what I want for my future with my career, but I know it's not this. It seems that this is one of those moments you're describing where you're saying, this is something that I thought I wanted. This is the way I thought my life was going to go, but now I'm not so sure. So how did you explore the thawing?
Yeah, that's right. Whereas in my past, I would stay in something that I knew wasn't me until I could figure out or find or connect to what was next, I felt deep down that this was not just about my career. This was about my life. This was about who I am in all parts of my life. This wasn't something that I could just relegate to a job or a career. So I decided to remove all of the career labels from myself, the things that I would have traditionally used to describe myself, and commit to what I came to call my year of experimentation. I decided to leave my job to pursue a path that I knew would be focused on people, not necessarily products, brands, businesses, the space that I'd been working in. I didn't know what that was, but I did feel a lot of pressure to be able to label myself, to introduce myself. You know, when you meet someone, especially in the context of like a life and career exploration and meeting a ton of people, they're like, well, what do you do? I did not know how to describe myself. And I felt such a frustration and confusion with that. The stories that we use to describe ourselves, they really do create our reality, and they are what connect us to other people because they create that meaning and connection point. And I didn't have one that felt true to me. I didn't have one that felt right to me.
You mean stepping away from your full-time role, took the jacket off that had the label that said, "Hi, I'm Lizzie. I do this at this company."
Yes.
That's big. I'm in the moment. It is huge. And I don't think you realize that you're wearing that jacket until you no longer have that jacket to put on. So that must have been very interesting for you to come into that realization. What did you do? How did you ease yourself into telling your new story?
So two things happened in parallel. Both are interconnected, but I think they're separate thoughts. One is I began to notice what are the things that I say in conversation that have me feel really good? What are the things that I'm noticing are also having other people feel really good and that are invoking their curiosity and that seem to be moving things forward in a creative way? When I began to say, you know, this is who I've been, I'm in an inflection point, and right now I'm giving myself the gift of experimenting with what's next. These are some of the things I'm passionate about. I notice that you're doing this thing. I'm so curious about it. I immediately started getting asked, will you do a project with me? Oh, it could be so cool to bring someone from that background into this work. Or even just meeting someone at a coffee shop personally, building a new friendship or getting to know someone in my community and sharing this story. The number of people who I now know completely pivoted careers because of hearing what it was I was doing, it's really astounding. So this idea of I'm experimenting, I stopped thinking of my life and things as so black and white. So I'm a strategist or I'm a what am I? No, like the process is the whole purpose.
It's incredibly brave to people who are not yet ready or don't feel empowered to take that step, to see a living, breathing example of someone taking that step, thoughtfully taking that step into a year or whatever the time frame is of intense experimentation. So I can see that would be something that would create these amazing conversations and connections, because so many, we know what the stats are, up to, depending on where you are in the globe, 70% of any workforce would like the ability to change jobs. That's a big number of us. And so to see somebody that is saying, I'm taking time to do experimentation, that's probably pretty thrilling for someone that is standing back and not feeling ready to take that first step.
The Podgress Report is brought to you by me. Supporting this passion project by subscribing means I can continue bringing you incredible guests their success stories, the latest research, and experts on healthy work, career development, entrepreneurism, and solopreneurism. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the report.
Absolutely. There is a lot of very understandable fear around money in doing something like this. And here, I'd love to speak to that a little bit because that's a very real fear. I had worked nonstop since I was 16 years old because I thought that's what I needed to do to be quite frank, separate myself from my family. I needed that quote unquote security. So I had enough runway to give myself permission to do what I called like the work of learning who I am in my life. I knew at the time I could always go get a full-time job. I'd proven that to myself. So that was the approach that I took. However, this discovering who you are and discovering what's next, you can do this in any job while you are in the job. What is something that you can do every day to begin moving forward, to begin experimenting? Whether it's a conversation you want to have, journaling, doing a new creative activity that feels really good to you, maybe taking on a pro bono project, working with a coach, whatever it might be, there's no reason you can't start exploring and discovering yourself and what's next in your career from wherever it is you are.
100% agree with that and wish that I had done more active research before I had let myself get to the state that I got to. The reason I'm bringing this up is because people ask me, well, how did you build that runway? And I unequivocally say, listen, I don't recommend my path to anyone. I really think that you can do this while you're if you are gainfully employed, while you're gainfully employed, and it can be something that you do every single day, a little bit at a time. And in fact, build some boundaries around it to honor that space of self, especially if you've leaned too far into pushing through your current role. If you know you're not happy in your current role and you don't know exactly the root cause why, potentially putting up some boundaries to explore yourself to get down to the root cause why is the most important step you can take before seeking out just another role.
That's exactly
the escape
right.
hatch isn't the best hatch.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Jen, one thing I'd love to name is your path is perfect for you because I very much believe our purpose often meets us in the pain, in the realization. And so if you did what you just described to other people, which is amazing advice, which now you can offer from the place that you're in, you wouldn't be able to share this story with so many people who need to hear it. You would not have this podcast. Things would be very different. And so your path is perfectly made for you. And I feel really grateful that you're sharing all that you're learning and you did learn so other people don't have to go through this.
Yeah, and that's the point. However, I wish I also didn't have to go through it. This is the reason I'm talking about this and talking about these alternate paths with people like you is because nobody should be aspiring to having 70% of the workforce really wishing they could do something different than they spend 40 to 60 hours of their week doing every week. And that's no one's happy path. So thank you for saying so. If people can do it in the way you're describing, which is take some time every day to explore while gainfully employed, if you are gainfully employed, it's a fantastic way to start working on your what's next. That's lower stress. Now, you funded your journey because, yes, you worked and worked and worked and were able to fund your time of self-exploration. That is another opportunity, but I agree 100%. You could do it while you're still working in your current role.
The things that you're learning as you're experimenting in parallel, many of those things you can begin to incorporate into your current role to even change how you're showing up in your current role. I work with a number of people in these moments, and at least 50% of them end up feeling completely re-energized and like a new human in their current company or current role, or finding a new path within their current company. It's so much around how you feel when you're doing what you're doing.
Right. We have talked just a tiny bit about your own time of experimentation.
Yes.
Where did that bring you? And I know there's a lot that's happened since then, but maybe we can start to talk a little bit about where you stand now. I really want to touch on the idea of the portfolio career, because that blew my mind when I heard about it. How you've taken what you've learned, added it to what you had as you went into that experimentation, and how that formed your new story.
Absolutely. So during this year of experimentation, while I was doing projects, learning a lot about myself, I assumed there was a coach I could work with to answer the question, who am I? There wasn't. So I ended up working with a career coach, a life coach, a therapist, this collection of different people who offered very valuable services, but they didn't address the whole of who I was. One of the coaches I worked with that I felt the greatest connection to, because she oriented her coaching around something called narratives, like moving from one narrative of who I am into another narrative. I ended up, simply because I wanted to learn more about it, getting certified in the method at a wonderful school called New Ventures West. I didn't come out of that certification thinking I want to become a coach. I was just like, oh, this is giving me so many tools to understand who I am and how it is I want to approach my life. One of the greatest things that I learned through therapists, through healers, through life coaches, through career coaches, it wasn't even about what I was learning. It was about all of the things I was unlearning. I was a journalism major. I'm a writer. I love to write. I've journaled my entire life. And I was keeping notes in my journey of all of the stories of who I was that were not actually mine. The beliefs that I had that were inherited by culture, by who I thought I needed to be. As I unraveled all of the stories of who I wasn't, who I actually was started to emerge. And I'll say that the distinction between the who I wasn't and who I was, the who I wasn't were things that felt heavy or confusing or like a burden to me. And the who I was were the things that made me feel uniquely alive, like out of the box a little. I began to really step into this new story of self. And when I say everything changed, I mean everything changed. Like how I held my body changed, how I spoke with people changed. I remember at the time I lost like 10 pounds because it was like I was shedding all of this weight that was not mine anymore. And I was becoming light and free and creative again. I ended up developing something that was a little bit of an experiment called story coaching. Very much designed for people like me in crossroads in their careers, when the story of who they were was too small to hold who they really are now, and they wanted to articulate who they are and what's next for them. People appreciated this because I was a former brand strategist. So it was like very much under the guise of personal branding at the time. I did that in parallel with executive coaching because I had an executive coaching certification, which was also really fulfilling to me. Taking all that I knew as an innovation strategist and applying it to the quote unquote people side of organizations, leadership development, culture transformation. I was coaching, consulting. I also started doing executive recruiting for design and innovation, which is something that just fell on my lap. Working with people in such pivotal career moments, I would often get, well, do you do recruiting? And I thought, that could be a lot of fun. I know a lot of people. I love connecting with people. I understand how creatively run companies work. I've been in those companies before. And so I started taking on a book of executive recruiting, and I did all of these things. I loved all of these things. They were all interconnected.
For those of you that are keeping count, Lizzie is saying she didn't have one jacket on with one name tag that had a role underneath it. Lizzie is saying she has these skills that she can use to do what we, coming from a traditional full-time background, would say is 4, 5, 6 jobs. That Lizzie can take her skills and her superpowers and use them in different ways to deliver value in ways that are both interesting to you, Lizzie, and also beneficial to the customer, the client, the organization that's recruiting, and the person to be found. I think that is one of the most exciting concepts. It's a little bit different than a fractional role. It's actually using the things that energize you, which I say where you have expertise and you're energized, those are your superpowers. And I'm using them in different arrays to do these multiple different pursuits, but all of them give me energy and are beneficial to my whole life.
Absolutely. They now, 8 years later, things look a little bit different. But during my year of experimentation, I said yes to anything that felt exciting to me. One of the primary qualifiers for what felt exciting to me was, well, 2 things. One, I had never done it before. And then number 2, the people that I was going to be working with felt like a hell yes to me. Those are the things that were really important to me. There were a number of things I took on that I quickly realized, oh, these are not my things. So I did a lot of, for instance, learning design. I would be hired by a company and they'd say, we want to teach our managers how to use this skill. And I would design a curriculum. That's not my thing. I could do it. I did a lot of employee experience design. Also not my thing. Did a lot of org design, which feels like a little bit more mechanical. Not my thing, but I needed to go through the process of trying all of these things, offering immense value to the company, like learning a lot from it. But I also was really good about noticing what are the things that are not my thing and moving forward with the things that are.
Yeah, this is something that is a recurring theme as I'm having conversations with people. It's not just about crafting your vision. It's also getting very, very clear on your anti-vision, knowing this is not it. This is not what I'm looking for. And it's not because you didn't try it. You assessed it. You took time to really have a point of view on it for having done it. You can say from a position of real understanding that I could do it, but it's not what I should be doing. It doesn't energize me. It isn't the highest and best use of my considerable talents. So therefore, I'm going to continue to try to craft what is more of my vision. That's fantastic. How long have you been working on this idea of having this portfolio career? What's the time frame from your year of experimentation to today?
I believe it's 7 or 8 years. I feel like I've lived 25 lives since then. I don't necessarily use the word portfolio career anymore, but I know it's something that is, when it's new to people, it can be very energizing and a really helpful framework, thinking of your portfolio of talent, just like you might a stock portfolio. I now see my work in life as this interconnected journey of self-discovery. What is it that I'm here to learn? What is it that I'm here to give to the world? What is it that I'm here to receive? I am certain I will probably have like 15 more careers. I have no idea what those are. I mean, obviously I have some stable of clients, but it is constantly evolving as my life evolves. Right now, and for the foreseeable future, I have a very strong story coaching practice, which is now full of everything that I've learned in my own life and working with hundreds if not more, of leaders in really pivotal moments in their career or in their companies. And it also now includes, I've been trained in intuition. I have healed from an incurable cancer, which brought me into a lot of work around body and energy. There are a number of modalities that I bring into this work. And I work with every person as an individual because everyone needs something a little bit unique. So story coaching, executive recruiting is something that continues to light me up, and also growth advisory. Regardless of what anyone comes to me needing or wanting, what I really believe is they're looking for a feeling of wholeness.
Yeah.
And so
you said that as well from the beginning when you said, I looked out there for somebody to help me, to coach me, and I found different coaches of different partitions of my life.
yes.
And that is really important. I had a former CMO of mine on who talked about it as well. There is no work life, there is life. Yeah. That's a very strong position to stand on, to say, I'm going to work with you, the person, and maybe, yes, the story that you tell will include your work, but it is not only your work.
That's right. And this is true of every person and then also every company, right? Every one of us is unique. In so many ways, I view my work and my life and my own work in my own life as removing the layers of the things that I am not and embracing the uniqueness of who I am. AI, for instance, is here as a lesson, as an experience on our path to help us connect to more of what makes us uniquely and innately human. Some of those things we've forgotten. And so uniqueness is something that I'm a big champion of, and the people who I'm seeing feel the most fulfilled in life right now are embracing all of their quirks, all of their uniqueness. And this is true of people and companies, right? Mm-hmm. To really give yourself permission to break outside of that box.
Yeah. You said earlier that the word authenticity is a way that we use to describe a meaningful interaction. But to be honest, authentic interactions to me are interactions. Everything else is a facsimile. If it's not authentic, why do it? And many days, many times, you're going into a workplace where you feel you cannot bring yourself, you cannot be yourself, you've maybe lost yourself. And so, yes, having somebody that says to you, no, you are a gift, and you have gifts, and you should embrace these facets of yourself as the gift. The uniqueness of you is actually the gift. I think that is a wonderful thing to bring into working with clients, customers, companies, institutions, organizations, to say, no, the unique amalgam of you is actually what makes you special.
It is. We are all here right now for a reason, and it's not to be a replica of each other. It is to embrace the fullness of who we are. And when we do, even though we might be working separately in separate parts of the world, we are ultimately all working together. Like, that is how things are ideally designed for.
Right. Agree. You have dropped so much of your knowledge. You know that the people listening to this podcast are people who are in that moment between, I know this isn't it, but I'm not quite sure what it is. I think you've said something that's very important for those people is to begin with doing something every day, to dedicate time to that self-discovery every day. Is there any other step that you would recommend?
Yes, a couple things, a couple beliefs.
Okay.
My recommendation is that everyone say these things out loud. The first one is, it's not too late. I am right on time. And only you get to choose the meaning that you make of your past and your present and what is possible for your future. You really do have the power to choose. And so something that I continue to do is find newer, truer versions of my story, of my past, that allow me to heal and to grow and to create and to evolve. And so, really notice the agency that you have to choose your own meaning for yourself in this moment.
Thank you for your time and for sharing your journey of experimentation. And one of the things that I know about you, Lizzie, is you are a super effective connector. What makes you such a good connector is that you are listening with curiosity and engaged with curiosity throughout your life. And it is something that inspires me. I'm so thankful to you for coming on and talking to people in a moment where potentially they feel folded in on themselves, to just remind people that you can do it on your own time, but you should prioritize it every day, and that it is not too late to begin that experimentation right now. Thank you for reminding us of that today.
Thank you, Jen. Oh, what a gift it's been to connect with you. I'm so glad we did this.
Back at you. Okay. Thank you, Lizzie. I cannot wait to see how your story evolves.
Wow. This conversation covered a lot of ground. And if you take nothing else from today's episode, here's what I hope you do carry forward. You can start to take action today on evolving your life from right where you are. You can and you should. Even small actions drive change, and consistent, curious action over time, it's transformative. It takes no money and very little time to simply reach out to someone to say, I'm interested in what you're doing. Would you be open to chatting? The worst that can happen is a no. The best that can happen is maybe even life-changing. You can find Lizzie on LinkedIn or by visiting workwithlizzie.com to learn more about the tools and the services Lizzie has developed to support people through pivotal moments and transitions. In upcoming episodes, we're joined by experts and researchers who are doing the work to improve the workplace. Provide your workplace wellness, career development, and entrepreneur success questions in the feedback link below to be potentially featured and have those questions answered by the experts. Thank you so much for listening today. Together, we can help each other and make the workplace a better place as we grow. Until next time, here's to your progress. Hi, it's Jen with some very important fine print. This podcast and its associated properties does not provide medical or mental health advice. Nothing on the Podgress Report is intended to substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. And please, if you're under duress or considering suicide, please reach out right this very minute to the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988 in the U.S. or searching for the helplines available to you in your country.